this guy comes up with a pitcher of beer. He's like, hey, man, hey, Al Qaeda, it's cool, man. It's like, he's still calling me Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, man, I really respect that you stood up for yourself, man. I really respect that. That's cool. He's like, listen, I just want to let you know. He's like, I'm a white supremacist. I'm like, what? This guy's thinking that we're going to relate to each other. Like, he didn't let go of the idea that I'm an extremist. He, to the contrary, he's like, well, let me connect with you. It's like, I'm an extremist too. We're going from dumber to smarter. That's like our basic trend. So you just got to kind of accept the dumbness sometimes, or acknowledge that it's dumbness and just keep it moving.
Do we need the dumbness in order to point us in the right direction?
I think so. I mean, it's like, how else do you? I mean, who's born with all the answers, right? It's like, if I'm crawling, you don't look at a baby and you're like, look at that fucking idiot baby. He's never heard of walking. Somebody smack his mom. Like, no, it's just a baby.
Today's topic, we are going to prove that you can laugh at stereotypes. And today's stereotype is brought to you by Indians are good at spelling.
You can't laugh at that.
Welcome to You Can't Laugh at That, the podcast where we take topics you can't laugh at and we find ways to laugh at them in our never-ending quest to prove that anything can be funny. What's funny to you guys today? Anything, any Twitter strokes of genius? Steve?
I can do a gossip segment every week if you want.
Yeah. Let's do it with you. What's the gossip around town?
What is AOC doing?
Yeah. Any
honestly,
new...
nothing's funny right now to me because it ebbs and flows, and I'm sad. So
yeah. What about you, Pranav? Any?
There's nothing funny on Twitter, almost ever. I don't think really. There's like, because it's just the same. It's the same joke being replayed like 800 times, depending on your feed. It's the same fucking $1,400 stimulus. I'm gonna go to the dollar store and buy 1,400 stores. I'm like, fuck, shut up.
I don't know who needs to hear this, but I hate Twitter.
It's the worst of all the platforms. I mean, I know a lot of really good friends of mine who are very funny comics do great on there, and I love seeing their shit. But generally speaking, no, it's the worst platform.
Right.
It's where hacks reign supreme and get away with it pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's all just joke templates. You know what I mean? So it's pretty lame on Twitter. And other than that, outside of that, it's just pure hatred, just pure visceral hatred for all of humanity on there. So, yeah.
What's even the point of Twitter?
We just summed it up.
Yeah. There's no, it doesn't add to society. And if you think that it does, then you're the problem. And that's how every tweet goes. Joining us today from New York is Pranav Behari.
Hello.
Our lovely guest. Thanks for joining the podcast today.
I'm lovely.
Yes, you are lovely. My adjective game is weak. Hey. I haven't left the house in like months, so my adjectives
normalize calling brown male comedians lovely. That was my favorite tweet today. That was my favorite tweet. Yeah. Speaking of Twitter, also a callback. So
yes,
very recent callback, but still, it counts.
It does. We switched the topic. Once you leave one topic and then you can call it back. It's technically a callback. That's the actual formula for that.
That's it.
Pranav is a former writer for Mad Magazine, co-host of the Mango Bae podcast, which you can find where all podcasts are found.
And YouTube.
And YouTube, because they do it live, which we don't. We heavily edit this episode. We're going to talk for an hour and a half, and the episode's going to be 7 minutes long.
All right, shit.
Pranav has also been featured at clubs and festivals around the country, including the Milwaukee Comedy Festival, Rogue Island, Cape Fear. Plans for diving back into the festival scene when the world opens back up?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. I'm just trying to get a new tape because I've got a lot of new material from the last year, but it's tough, obviously, getting that shit on getting a good tape together because all the shows are outdoors and all that. So, but yeah, I miss doing festivals. I miss, hanging out in other scenes, meeting comics from all over the country. So yeah, I'm excited to get back into it.
Yeah. Is what do you miss the most about doing live stuff? Is that it? Just like meeting people
about doing live comedy?
Yeah.
I mean, it's you get the audience, the energy, it's a much different visceral experience, so there's nothing like it. All the recent live shows that I've been able to do, especially when things were really sparse. But I remember maybe 2 months ago, I was hanging out with Hannah Boone, a previous guest of yours. And we both got booked on the same show, and it was like January, and it was freezing, but this guy did it in his backyard, and he put up heat lamps, and he put up a tent, and we were both just like, all right, fuck, let's go do a show. Let's see how this goes. And it was insane because it was just like they were hungry for it, we were hungry for it, doing new material, crushing, amazing energy, and afterwards it felt like we had done like an 8 ball of coke. It was unbelievable. It felt like pure drugs, and it was incredible. So I want to get back to that feeling.
I miss it so much. And that, doing that outside too in the cold, like that's a shared experience. That amplifies definitely the brain cocktail going on when you're out there doing it. And
100%.
Yeah. I don't know if were there any outdoor shows here like during the winter? I don't remember. I've pretty much just been a recluse. Yeah.
Last one I did was Jeremy's, but that was in the summer.
That was August. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah. It's been since November really for me since I got on a stage.
Ramon did a weekly one in Lorraine.
In a park.
Yeah.
Yep. They say that tragedy plus time equals comedy. How long for you personally before you find something funny that shouldn't be funny? Like if something happens to you, how quickly are you on stage riffing on it? How quickly are you writing about it? How much time do you give it to marinate?
Well, I mean, on stage is one thing. I mean, I think my general nature as a person is that anything fucked up that happens, my mind immediately turns it into something funny just in my own head. It's just my way of processing, I think, the world, like a lot of comedians. On stage, it's tough. So it really depends on what it is, but I think there is definitely a time thing, but I think there's also an approach thing that's probably more important. It depends on like what you want to do. If you want to be just like balls out, super insensitive about something, you should wait like a couple of years, right? But if you're talking about something that's just like kind of quirky, if it's more about you, if it's self-deprecating and it happens to be in the context of that horrible negative thing, then that's another thing. COVID is like a weird thing, right? Because I have a bunch of COVID jokes. And it's a horrible, tragic, shitty thing, but it's something that we're all going through. So that's something I can easily make fun of and talk about. Because I'm going through it as much as anybody else is, I guess, right? So I don't know. I don't know what the shelf life is like. Plus, I'm not necessarily like always trying to go for the tragedy things, right? Like I don't have like, it's not like that movie Nightcrawler where I've just got like the scanner where I'm listening for tragedies. I'm like, there's a school shooting, like, let's trot another one out. So when you can pull it off, right? When you can make something shitty funny to everybody, the laugh is always that much bigger, that much deeper, and the connection because that much more kind of tangible between you and the audience, and it just makes for a way better time. Right. And you're leaving a much bigger impact on them. And yeah, the connection is just way deeper.
Mm-hmm. That's why it's been hard for me to do virtual stuff. But yeah, I always make sure people turn their cameras on. It's like, if I'm just looking at a name, it's like, what am I doing? Like, I'm just in a room alone. I might as well just record myself talking into my computer. And
pretty much.
And take notes. Yeah. So no, I'm with you, man. That's the best part.
It's like doing crowd work with the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. What made you start doing comedy in the first place?
people had always told me like, dude, you should do stand-up. You should do stand, because, whatever. Like, I was a class clown, and I used to make my family laugh a lot when I was a little kid. And it's just always been a big part of my life, is making people laugh. And I never really thought it was something I could do or whatever. And then, I started working at Mad Magazine for a while, and I was like, okay, you're funny. Why don't you just get into this? And then a few years ago, I was going through a lot of different life changes at the time. I just had a big surgery, and I was like, you know what, you got to go do something for yourself. You got to go do something for yourself now. And just go fucking try it. Just try it at least once, so you can see what it feels like and how it tasted. And so I did it. I went and I did an open mic, and I loved it, and I just didn't stop. I did it. At first I was like, I'll just do this like once a week as a hobby. And then within 3 weeks, I was doing it every day, multiple times a day. And just, you can't really keep me away from it. So
do you remember if there was a specific joke that like hooked you into it? Like, you get that first laugh, and it's almost like that's my reverse 9/11. Like, that's, I won't forget that, but in a good way.
You're November 9th. What was the joke that, here's a joke that used to get consistent laughs. I was talking about really bougie friends of mine here who are into food culture. This is one of my first jokes, and a friend of mine being like, "Hey, I want to go out and get some Yemeni food." It's like, how does that sound? I was like, that sounds terrible. I was like, why? You don't like Yemeni food? I was like, no, I don't like UN rations. And that used to get a huge laugh. That was like one of the first big laughs I would get. And that was, I'd say, one. There's some other ones too that I just am too embarrassed to even bring up now, but did get laughs. But yeah, I used that joke for probably my first 2 years of doing comedy. Mm-hmm. It was definitely in my set somewhere.
Do you remember what it was like when you wrote something like that, and then you kept getting those laughs, and then it's like, am I ever going to be able to write something that funny again?
I don't think I ever had that thought. Whatever. I just felt like on such a good, there's jokes that I have, which I love. And I know, God, I love this joke so much. This joke is amazing. And it's just it's my new girlfriend for 3 weeks, and I'll go out and I'm taking it out and it's brand new and it's just killing everywhere. But I know that feeling is going to fade and that something else is going to come and take its place. I think probably at the beginning, I would just be very excited, and then I would just be very dismayed once the joke lost its luster to me. And then when that happens, unless you train yourself properly, it starts losing the kind of zhuzh in front of the audience. But I don't think I ever felt like, oh, I'm not going to write a joke that's that funny again, right? I think the jokes just get different and you just keep growing. But I don't think that was ever a big fear for me.
What do you mean when you say train yourself properly, as far as a joke losing its luster?
I don't know. I feel like once you have a joke and it's a great joke, let's say, and you take it out and you use it a lot and you can rely on it to get laughs. I think after a while, there's jokes that are very good jokes. They're very funny and I like them. But I'm just sick of them. I'm sick of hearing them come out of my mouth, and it's boring. But, and when you get that feeling, if you're not careful, you're not really able to, it's the spontaneous energy of delivering a joke isn't there. And then the audience isn't really with it either. Right. They can sense it. Yep. And so that's why I think there's a definite discipline you have to get used to. And if you're in a band, right, you have to go out and sing the same you have to go sing Sweet Caroline for the 9,000th time. You're not gonna be like, Sweet Caroline, whatever, right? You have to be there. You have to feel it. You have to feel like you're in the moment when you thought of the joke and kind of be part of the audience in that way. So
I love the idea of just a somber Sweet Caroline.
Yeah.
Like, you know how they
the
repurpose
Johnny Cash.
yeah.
Well, no, let's update it. Wet ass pussy. There's a whore in this house. There's a whore in this house. You sick of it, but.
Yeah, there's that trend of repurposing like upbeat songs into movie trailers where like shit's going to hell.
Yeah.
Like sung by a children's choir or something. Like
there's a whore in this house. There's a whore in this house.
Coming soon. Yeah. So some of the mistakes that you made on the way between starting comedy and where you are now, is there anything that you can point at where, if you were to talk to a new comic and say, learn from what I did wrong, don't do this thing, what would that thing be?
That's a good question. And it's not a good question because I don't have those, because I definitely do. But I think the biggest thing is this is work too. It is a job. And so like what I was saying before about, I'm bored of that joke, I'm just going to do new joke that hasn't been tested as much. Is there's a certain kind of arrogance that can creep up and allow you to do that kind of thing. Whereas sometimes if you have to go and do a set, it's easy to get sick of material that works and to not ever want to do it again. But at least where I'm at in my career, and most people are, it's like, you still can't afford to just be like, well, I refuse to do that joke anymore. I'm done with that. I've passed that phase of my career or whatever. And I don't know. To me, it's a job, and that you have to be used to sometimes playing the same tunes again and again and again, and not be embarrassed by it or whatever, because you just have to do it, right? And so it's treating it like a job, and that means giving it your all for every set, pretty much. So whether you're doing old or new or whatever, but that's kind of the basic ethic of what I'm saying.
It's easy to forget that.
Also, don't drink before, for me, don't drink before going on stage. And don't be drunk and get on stage. There were definitely a few times where I'd had a couple, maybe literally one drink more than I should have. And I wasn't as sloppy or an idiot, but I just wasn't as sharp as I should have been. And I definitely learned from that. So I think substances is for sure something.
Yeah, it's harder to make those spontaneous connections when all your synapses aren't firing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I quit drinking too, and it really made things way better. That was around 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'd done maybe 2 or 3 open mics where I had too much, and that was all I needed to realize that, I can't. You're giving yourself an uphill battle to fight. You already have enough fun,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not even fun. You think it might be fun or something, but it's just not. It's not fun for anybody.
Mm-mm.
So,
all right.
Nope. Yeah, because I remember the one. It was I forgot what I was going to do next because they didn't laugh at the joke that I delivered because I did it out of order. The word choice was wrong, and it was well, I guess that's my time. All right, so let's dive into today's topic.
Mm-hmm.
Today's topic, we are going to prove that you can laugh at stereotypes. And today's stereotype is brought to you by Indians are good at spelling. I think it's funny, first of all, that it's just a stereotype that you're good at it. It's normally stereotypes have a negative connotation. How is that? How is that a stereotype? I don't know. Describe how would you define stereotype? Because obviously there's a positive connotation to it in some cases. In other cases, there's a negative connotation.
You mean, how would I define a stereotype in general?
Yeah.
Just a commonly held trope about a particular group of people, right? Just a broad sweeping generalization about a group of people would be a stereotype.
What is there? Do you have any other material that kind of pokes holes in that perspective on things?
Probably a lot, actually. I think there's definitely. I'm actually thinking of trying to look into my notes right now. but yeah, I think in general, I do play with a lot of stereotypes. Yeah, for sure. Definitely around like Indians, Indian Americans, stuff like that, for sure.
Have you like what sort of experiences have you had personally with with people that have those sweeping generalizations? I mean, you're Indian American, so do you run into people confusing you for something else? Do you run into do people do the go with a spelling bee, or like do you run into that?
Well, a lot of people will just randomly assume that I work in tech. Okay. That's like literally one of them, and that'll even be from other Indians. I'll just be like, shit, man, like get a grip. That's one. One time, a woman was like, "Hey, what are you?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm Indian." She's like, "Oh, Indian." I was like, "Well, you're so good looking. I never would have guessed Indian." I was like, "Bitch." She was like, "I would have guessed Latino," and I was so pissed. I was like, "How dare she say I look like a Latino?" I was like, "That bitch." No, but I was like, "Fuck." That was kind of harsh, but I guess I'll let you blow me. But I will be wagging my finger at you while you do it. And I will not be eating any celery before that blowjob. This is a callback for the listeners to an earlier conversation we had about celery giving you strong semen.
That's a previously on. You can't laugh at that.
Punchy cum.
Now, being in New York, obviously, people are there's just a giant spectrum of people from all different walks of life, which is, that was one of my favorite parts about being in the city is it really, because I came from a pretty sheltered, suburban neighborhood, and then just diving into New York, I loved it. I lived in Flatbush in Brooklyn, and there's all kinds of different cultures that I had never experienced in suburban Akron, Ohio. So did you ever experience like anything as a kid growing up in Pennsylvania where there was an obvious lack of understanding?
It was weird because I was, for the majority of my week growing up as a kid, Monday through Friday, I was probably the only Indian, or maybe one of only a couple Indians around. But at the same time, I had like a big brother who was like kind of a badass. And so I didn't have to deal with the normal kinds of bullying that might have happened to an Indian kid who's just there alone being Indian or whatever. Because everybody feared and loved and respected my brother. He was like an athlete. He was strong. He was good looking. He was vice, class president and all that kind of thing. He was a really good athlete. And so I think I had it easy in that way. I didn't really face anything until after 9/11, actually. Really? That was when things started to get a little bit dicey where I grew up in PA. And I remember coming home from like college or whatever, and like it was like 2003. This is in Ohio, or you guys are in Ohio. This is in central PA. And the Iraq War is just getting started, or it's been in swing for maybe a year or something. And I go to a bar with two other Indian friends of mine, a brother and a sister, and we go to like shoot pool and drink. And we're in this pool room. There's two tables. It's not very crowded. It's me, and then at the other one, there's these three people. It's a guy dressed in camo, some guy who looks like Santa Claus but like on meth, and then some really weird like Betty Homemaker looking chick, or like whatever. And these guys, there's Bon Jovi or something comes on, which who the fuck likes Bon Jovi? Not me. And this guy's like, "Oh, Bon Jovi, like, this sucks." He's like, "Al Qaeda play Bon Jovi." Is that Al Qaeda? And this guy keeps going on about Al Qaeda. It's like, "Hey, Al Qaeda, did you guys play Bon Jovi?" And I was like, I got pissed. That was a big and aggressive, strong guy at the time. And I fucking yelled at the guy. I was like, "Fuck you." It's like, "Shut the fuck up, or I'm going to come over there," and blah, 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 blah. And he shut up. And about 6 minutes after that, I'm there playing pool with my friends. This guy comes up with a pitcher of beer. He's like, "Hey, man, hey, Al Qaeda, it's cool, man." It's like, he's still calling me Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, man, I really respect that you stood up for yourself, man. I really respect that. That's cool. He's like, listen, I just want to let you know. He's like, I'm a white supremacist. I'm like, what? This guy's thinking that we're going to relate to each other. Like, he didn't let go of the idea that I'm an extremist. He, to the contrary, he's like, well, let me connect with you. It's like, I'm an extremist too, you know? And I was like, this is fucking nuts. And then this guy just keeps going. And I'm like, you're a fucking moron. And then the old guy comes up. He's like, I'm sorry about my son. I don't know what happened to him, what went wrong with him. Then this other lady comes up. And, you know, now my two friends are also talking with them. And the like homemaker woman is talking to my friends. It turns out they know people in common, Indian people. And like, we're like, what the fuck is going on here? But that is probably the most significant, like racially charged incident that I've ever had growing up in Pennsylvania was commiserating with a neo-Nazi.
I like that he just came up to you. It was like, hey, me too, man. All right.
Yeah.
That's funny. Have you ever talked about that on stage?
I haven't really, because the structure of it is, I don't know. I think being in New York, it forces you to be like a real laughs per minute kind of comic. Yeah. And so, I thought it. I think when I first started, I thought that would be a great thing to do, but it would always take me too long to get there, and I haven't really put a lot of thought into it as a joke. So I probably have to think about the atmospherics of it and all that stuff, and how I could punch it up and make it compelling. But it is a good story, and it's like very, So I mean, come to think of it, maybe I will start thinking about bringing that into the mix somehow.
I just love the attempt to relate. Like, there's, even though what he's saying, there's obviously, he goes home and there's a lot of malice there. Like, in the moment, he was like, dude, what if I can solve, like, I can be the representative. Like, this is my duty.
He was trying to solve racism in his own weird way, his own special way, you know?
It was a very roadhousey experience too. It's just kind of like, wasn't here, boy. It's so backwards.
Exactly.
Yeah, they need to bring in Patrick Swayze for more episodes of Bar Rescue. Roadhouse was the original Bar Rescue.
The ghost of Patrick Swayze.
Right.
Oh my God.
I mean, they already.
There you go. Bon Jovi was playing too.
The ghost of Patrick Swayze is going to play the ghost of Patrick Swayze's character
in Ghost. It has to be his character from Ghost, sadly.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't remember any of his characters' names, just Patrick Swayze.
He's just Patrick Swayze. That's how good he was, you know?
Right. He transcended the character.
His name was Dalton. It was Dalton. Okay? Name was Dalton in Roadhouse. Great movie.
Yeah. I used to work at a restaurant where they'd play like old VHSs, and every Sunday they'd put on 3 Swayze movies, and Roadhouse was always the first one.
The Sunday Swayzes.
Yep.
Before it was ever the Sunday Scary.
Yep.
The Sunday Swayzes.
Yeah, when it was a simpler time. Simpler time. Now, the thing that I like about that story too is, like, it's very evident the disconnect. I mean, obviously, education and having experience with people who aren't like you is invaluable. People grow leaps and bounds when they open their minds to information, to other people's perspectives. And the reason most stereotypes exist is because it's easier to just be like, oh, that guy, Al Qaeda, and like, that's it. Brain doesn't have to do any extra work. But it's when people start acting on those that's where the trouble comes.
Right.
But it's good that, it didn't come to that. Now, in this case, the stereotype that Indians are good at spelling. I mean, it exists for obvious reasons. I mean, over the last, 20 years, let's see, the 8-way tie that you talk about in your bit, which we'll get to in a second. There was the one white girl. And then let's see. The one white girl, the token. In 2007, Evan O'Dourney, and 2006, Carrie Close. But other than that, between 2002 and 2019, it's been all South Asian winners.
Yeah.
And if you go back to like some of the winning words from the original spelling bees, they're really easy words. Invulnerable, 1932.
Wow.
Torsion, 1933. Intelligible, 1935. Eczema in 1936. I mean, it's, and then you get to today, and I can't even, like, I don't know what any of these words are. There's no way they're spelled phonetically in some of these cases. So, yeah, you've raised the game when it comes to.
And they had no choice but to make the words harder, you know, because of the Indians. So.
But before you give away the punchline of your bit, let's introduce the clip, and then we'll play it and prove through Pranav that you can laugh at this stereotype.
Got any sports fans in the audience? Yeah? All right, cool. So you guys saw the big spelling bee then last week, right? Yeah, ESPN 11? Oh my God, that was lit, huh? That shit was intense. Wow. Look, there was, for all the non-jocks in here, there was a big spelling bee last week. Scripps National Spelling Bee. There was an 8-way tie in the spelling bee. Okay? 8-way tie. It was 7 Indian kids and 1 white girl. Okay? When they got together after for the winner's photo, it looked like she was there to save the children. You know what I'm saying? It's a good look. Very good look. 7 Indians. Holy shit. A friend of mine asked me, I'm Indian. He was like, Pranav, why do Indians always win the spelling bee? And I was like, did you read their fucking names? Every day of their life is a spelling bee. Okay? There's no better training than having an Indian name in America. Going to the actual spelling bee, that's just them taking the ankle weights off and dancing. You know what I'm saying? It's nothing to them. I think it's audacious, though, you know? To have like just like a white guy with like a monosyllabic name trying to quiz these kids on spelling, you know what I'm saying? That's audacious. Oh, you want me to spell dromedary? How about you spell my last name? Astavakajaya Batmanabam. Language of origin, the 7 train.
Little inside baseball New York reference there.
Yeah, now that tag is actually language of origin New Jersey. I shortly after that, you know, you can never really get a good clip of a thing because your jokes are always changing.
Right.
Yeah. That's the bit. Yeah.
What struck you as funny? What inspired the conception of that bit?
Well, you know, there was of course just the news. And then people are talking about the news, and you know, because there was the big thing about it is that there were 7 Indian kids who were tied for it, right? And so everyone's talking about that, and so everyone's asking about why Indians win them. And then, you know, for me, the obvious thing was just like, well, a lot of Indians have very long and complicated names, right? Especially like South Indians. Mm-hmm. And so that was the immediate joke. But for me, my favorite joke in that is the one about there being one white girl who looks like she's there to save the children. To me, that's the one I prefer. And that's another stereotype, which I thought was maybe more fun to play around with. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wanted spelling bee when I was a kid. So, and I never understood why spelling, my parents didn't enroll me in the spelling bee or any of that shit either. It was just like a random school spelling bee that I won. And I was a horrible student. So that was the only spelling bee I'd ever, or the only thing that my parents were like, oh, you are not retarded. That's amazing. Like, great. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, it was just playing on 2 specific stereotypes, actually. One, that Indians are in the spelling bee a lot, and then 2, that we have fucking weird names, right? Or difficult names in the culture. And so it's obviously very counterproductive to think that it's not hard to spell your own name, obviously, right? But I thought that was a fun concept to play around with, that it somehow would be, right? So in a weird way, places them both in and outside of their own Indianness.
And then turning it on the white, the host, the announcer, the monosyllabic name.
right. Exactly. Yeah. It's too easy for them. So yeah, they shouldn't be in charge of the spelling bees anymore.
Right.
It should be our moms, our Indian moms who named us.
And that's a stereotype that I saw in a lot of the bits that I was looking kind of through, like what other comics have joked about this, and it's always the parent, the disapproving father,
right, yeah.
The white girl gets eliminated, and in our house we say the 23rd place is better than 24th place, whereas
right.
You get second place and it's like,
yeah. Well, you were doing the Indian head bobble very well of this.
Was that what that was?
Yeah, I didn't know if that was intentional or not,
No.
but I was like, hey, that's pretty good.
No. I wasn't, but thank you. I'll make sure to write a joke for that.
It's gonna kill. I can tell you already.
That's exactly what people want to hear. A white dude talking
NC.
about brown people.
NC.
Yeah. So your bit, it's very structurally sound. Like the ebbs and flows are great. You open with the sports fans, spelling bee, kind of the twist on that punchline, and then you set up the bit really well. You use words like intense and lit just to kind of introduce the incongruity between spelling bee and the sport. Have you dove any deeper into that? I don't want to use the word incongruity twice. Into the conflicting story there between sports and spelling bee?
Not really, because in order to do that setup on that joke, that was very recent to the actual event itself. Now it's 2 years later, actually, or it's going to be 2 years later. So I can't say, you heard about the spelling bee. You guys into sports? Now I figured out ways of restructuring it in terms of like who here was an athlete in high school, right? And they're like, oh, baseball. I was like, oh yeah, I was a huge athlete, spelling bee, right? Yeah. I almost went all states, but I decided to go into Quiz Bowl instead, right? I just try to work with that. I don't think it's the kind of misdirect of it isn't as strong as it was back then, but it works well enough. It's serviceable to get me where I need to go with the joke. But it's not integral to the joke. So It's not something that I stress about too much.
Right. And as I asked that question, I realized that, sometimes when I'm putting a new bit together, I tend to get a little bit long-winded on what the joke isn't about, so that when we get to like what's actually funny, it's lost its luster. So like as you were explaining, I was like, oh yeah, that would totally take away from the hit of the 7 Indian kids, 1 white girl.
Yeah.
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 I love that you play on the white savior trope too. I was actually listening to, I don't know if you have ever listened to this podcast, it's called Hot Breath. It's a comedy podcast, and Roy Wood Jr. was on, and he was talking about how he's like trying to work on a bit about how every movie about like Black excellence, there has to be a white person who either is like not necessarily the savior overtly, like Green Book, or like what's the football one, Blindside, with Sandra Bullock, but there also has to be a white savior in a sense that there needs to be a character there that's so terrible for the whether it's Black or Indian or Hispanic, whatever, to overcome, so that they there's that like juxtaposition even in that case. So I like any unique way of looking at the white savior, and in the spelling bee, that's such a fun place for it. It's so like the stakes are so low, you know, that anybody can laugh about it. It's not like well, you can't say that.
Right. Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's a terribly like controversial joke. And if I had had some other tapes that had some edgier material, that would have been better. But I think it definitely works for the kind of subject of stereotypes. And look, the fact is that you could not make that joke as a white guy, right? Coming from you, people would not allow that. They wouldn't like it. And because it's not your community, and it's your inability to say my name or to spell my name isn't, or difficulty spelling it is not as, I don't want to say it's necessarily not as funny, but it's not as earned, right? So it's like, I think that's kind of the issue there with you know, who can make a joke like that and who can't. I don't think it's it's not a very edgy joke at all. It's funny, but again, when I think about, okay, you know, how would I feel if you know, who's a comic we can just name? If Chris D'Elia made that joke, I'd be like, shut the fuck up, you fucking pedophile. You know? Like, I was trying to think of a comic that I just don't think is funny, and he happens to be one.
All right.
Like, is that what I'm saying? John
Mulaney?
Mulaney? Because like if John Mulaney did, I'd be like, that's good job, Mulaney, good job, buddy, or whatever. Because I think he's funny, but yeah, I mean, it's a joke that, you know, it's best told by an Indian,
right?
And luckily it was. So yeah.
So here we are, yeah.
But I mean, having said that, I make a lot of shitty stereotype jokes as about non-Indian groups, you know. So it's like, I have a really bad joke that I was doing for a while, and it would get laughs. Sometimes it would get huge laughs, and then sometimes just because of the subject matter, people wouldn't like it. It was about a time when I saw a deaf family in the airport, and they looked lost, and, you know, they were signing to each other really frantically. And I thought, oh, let me help this deaf family. And then as I got closer to them, I realized, oh, they're not deaf. They're just Italian. And then I knew they were Italian because the mom had a black eye. Yeah. So that was, some cold ziti. But people, it's like, that's a fucked up joke to make, you know, Italian or Indian, Italian, whoever you are. It's not a nice assessment of Italian American people, right? And it's not really my joke to make that. Now, on the other hand, if an Italian American guy made that joke, that might seem kind of dark and menacing. Like, bro, you're talking about your mom getting beat up like that and laughing. That's fucked up. You know, I don't know why people let me get away with telling it when they did. I think it really more the domestic abuse aspect of it is kind of what was unsavory to people. So more than the Italian part, which says something.
Yeah. You introduced that extra layer that.
Yeah.
They were like, we'll go with the hand thing.
The hand gesture thing, they were okay, but when it became the real Italian hand gesture, they weren't so into it. You know. Yeah.
You know what an Italian says on 9/11? Never forget about it.
Love that crossover.
Just fly in with another one of those. Good work. So the ankle weights line, I mean, you know, the spelling bee being easy to them, that's a framing. You give the reason why. You answer the question without straight up just saying, you know, why are Indians so good at being the spelling bee? It's because our names are so long. Like, right. Yeah.
Which is what the title is, but that's what YouTube and social media demands,
right,
with clips and so on. But yeah.
Right. I used to be like, I need to come up with a clever title for it. And it's like, no, literally just say what it is. Say what it is.
Just pure SEO.
Yeah. Comedian jokes about, that's it.
Right.
I was reading about stereotypes and positive stereotypes. The problem with positive stereotypes is they put pressure on people to live up to the positive stereotypes. And that way they become inadvertently negative stereotypes in a sense too. So I think that was what I wanted to say earlier. But yeah, so
that's an interesting take.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
It's like a sociological thing. It's like it's observed, and I read it in some whatever.
Did you like run into that at all? As far as
I mean, I was not like most. I mean, doing comedy, no, that's not necessarily. But like growing up, it was like, the other stereotypes about Indians: really good at math, really good students. Mm-hmm. And I was not a good student growing up. So a lot of people were like, giving me weird side eye and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe as part of it is that pressure. I think the other part of it is just like anybody, any human being wants to be seen as unique and wants to be seen as a human being in their own right. And themselves and not circumscribed by these attributes that other people are putting or imposing on them socially or whatever. So anytime you do that, it's going to feel shitty. Even if you go up to an Indian guy who's an IT guy and not knowing him and him not knowing you and being like, you work in IT, huh? Even if he does work in IT, he's probably just going to be like, fuck you, how do you know I'm not a pimp?
Right.
And I'm not running whores or something like that, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think the expectation thing is definitely part of it. I think there's just a human instinct that we all have about wanting to just be taken on our own terms, case by case.
We're all born different. We're all wired differently, and we all have different life experiences, and it's the combination of nature and nurture, and just kind of limiting it to, what race are you? It's lazy, number one, and it stops you from really getting to know the actual person behind it, which, that's where a lot of problems lie on a societal scale. It's like, oh, this person is this. Well, that means, that if that, then what else? And that's based off of your own personal experience.
Yeah, totally.
Even on a genetic standpoint, if we're talking about like different cultures and different races of people, there aren't rigid boundaries to that. So it's like when you're constantly giving, labels to people, it's just an extremely lazy way to look at the world. It's like one of those things. There's no place where one race begins and another race. Mm-hmm. Like,
yeah, it's just very easy, a very easy and simplistic way of making the world more kind of apprehensible, I guess, or comprehensible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just easy.
And now it's done in a way like at one point in time, it was done in a way where it's like, oh, if you're Indian, well, then that means because of your race, this is why you do what you do. So now that has been shifted to because of your culture, this is why you do what you do. And then that's where like the racial tension comes into play. It's like, it's almost like a cheat code for them to simplify something that's very complex. For sure. Yeah. But it's still a step forward in a better direction in a way. Because even then, as you start to break that down, then what are you actually you're going to get further and further away from bigotry and more into rational explanations for why different people behave differently and so on. So, yeah. Basic.
I mean, it's just, we're going from dumber to smarter. That's like our basic trend. So you just got to kind of accept the dumbness sometimes, or acknowledge that it's dumbness and just keep it moving.
Do we need the dumbness in order to point us in the right direction? I think so. I mean, it's like, how else who's born with all the answers, right? It's like, if I'm crawling, you don't look at a baby and you're like, look at that fucking idiot baby. He's never heard of walking. Fucking dumb fuck. Somebody smack his mom. Like, no, it's just a baby. I mean, so, So the same does the same thing like go both ways as far as, somebody who grows up in a very insulated environment, who sees, somebody who looks different from them or who believes differently from them. And, so how do we make that connection in a bar with a pitcher of beer?
Right. Well, you just got to go in hard and heavy and just be like, hey, I'm a neo-Nazi, like the guy in my experience. And no, I think, look, that was a good example, though, of a guy who actually from the beginning didn't even want to be like me. That was his only way to connect with human beings, though. You know what I mean? Very weird and almost like, pulling on a girl's pigtails when you're in kindergarten because you have a crush on her or something, right? It was just like the only way he could think of to establish some kind of intimacy with another person, right? Or break through a social barrier with another person. And that was his unfortunate way of doing it, but it did kind of work. So, yeah.
Have you ever worked with an audience that was of that ilk, or like, have you ever done this bit in front of an audience that, you point out in the bit, like you clarify that you are Indian, obviously the one chick thought you were Latino, but do you, have you run into an audience that was, have you like a more rural audience, a more,
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, like North Carolina, places like that. You run into, it's just, as a comedian, you're inherently funnier than them, or you're gonna be. So once you make fun of them and get the rest of the audience laughing at them or at the folly of their ways, then you kind of win the room back and you show your competence, and then they trust you, and then they go with you and they listen to you, and then maybe they slowly are kind of absorbed into your subjectivity, and then maybe you change somebody's mind about something. Not that that's necessarily my goal as a comedian, but that's a possibility. So yeah.
Is that like, how do you connect with an audience that's resistant to your stylings?
Yeah, then I think if you're just bombing, you have to at some point just get kind of self-deprecating. Right. And just and then see where that can kind of take you, and get into crowd work a little bit. And, sometimes jokes just don't work. Well,
yeah. Sometimes you get, you
it's very sad reality.
I know. All of my jokes that have never worked are flashing before my eyes.
It's like you go into shows hot sometimes, like, oh, I'm gonna fucking kill, and then it's like, no, they're wearing like comedy Kevlar or something, and they don't necessarily even want to hear jokes. They want like a more personal, kind of intimate and spontaneous experience, and you have to give them that, and then you can maybe start easing them into jokes, and
yeah, there's there's a skill. You got to be adaptable instantly. Because I've walked into a room, saw an audience, and thought, oh, they're not going to like any of my stuff, and I have to change it now. But then the show starts, and it's like, oh, they're actually like, they might like my stuff. And I'm all about, there are some comics who don't watch the comics before them. I feel like that's so important.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get a feel meet them where they are, where the audience, not the other comics.
Yeah.
The reason I love doing this show is because everybody has a different perspective of comedy, of the art, of the science of it. And, there's no one way to do it right. I pick up little things from everybody, which is super cool. I always ask, at the end of these recordings, if you have one tip for a comic that is trying to make a joke about the topic of the episode. And maybe it'll work for me, but I'm not going to get on stage and be like, these Indians and the spelling bee, am I right?
Dave likes to take notes and then go and be Glenn Beck over there on that board.
Whole board, like mad circling, like Al Qaeda question mark.
He puts the autism and patriotism.
Love it.
Oh man. So
if somebody wants to play with stereotypes, what is the tip I would give them?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's not your group, if it's not like your cultural group or whatever, you have to figure out a way to be making fun of yourself then, right? Mm-hmm. Like, to me, that's then what actually can be funny about it. And then also will not land you on the front page of Twitter or whatever, if that's like your concern. But I think the way to make it funny, if it's not your group, is to make it about yourself and poke fun at your own perceptions of stereotypes and things like that. So,
yeah. Whenever anybody asks me like, oh, how can I be funny? It's first place to look is, what do you think about the thing that makes you angry?
Right.
Punch down on yourself first and then find a way to connect that with people. Because
totally true.
I mean, everybody can relate to that. Everybody can relate to, having irrational thoughts. And so if you can connect that, like, what's a time that you thought something about somebody, and then once you got to know that person, it turned out to be your soulmate or something.
And everyone can relate to that, even though not everyone wants to admit it. So it's a cathartic experience for people to hear that. Right. And they can laugh. They will laugh very hard.
And not even necessarily a race thing. Like, we've all met somebody and thought, oh, I don't like this person. And then after getting to know them, you learn you have so much in common and
of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we can all connect with that. And I think that's an important place to start. There are some cases where people try too hard, not even to be funny, but to make a connection without actually reading the situation. And I think that's where a lot of humor can be found. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, a girl won the spelling bee and she went on CNN, and it was Cuomo, and then I forget the name of the co-anchor. But she had a little slip of, not really slip of the tongue, but just a miscalculated remark. I have the clip pulled up. I don't know if Jeremy's back or not. But if you are, Jeremy, yes, good timing. All right. The CNN clip, and then we'll bring it home after we look at this example in foot in mouth.
Literally like walking back into the room as you were like, I wonder if Jeremy's back.
Yeah. We actually didn't talk at all once you left. It's been 9 minutes and we just sat here waiting.
Bless your heart.
Covfefe, Cofefe.
Good enough.
Close. You win.
Thank you very much. That's the only good answer we've heard about that word in days.
It was really Covfe.
We don't know that.
Fe. But it, again, is a nonsense word. So we're not sure that its root is actually in Sanskrit, which is what you're probably used to using. So I don't know. Anyway.
Oh, my
you
God.
Did a great
Why?
job.
That's so stupid. I did not expect that. That wasn't just dumb. That was like funny and dumb. Sanskrit.
The language that you're used to.
Cuneiform? Is that what you use?
Exactly. Hieroglyphics.
Yeah, exactly.
So you learned to spell from the Rosetta Stone. Tell us more about that experience. The Code of Hammurabi, one of your favorite texts to read.
Insane. Totally insane.
Oh man. I mean, I don't know if we've seen that woman ever since, because of course you know how Twitter goes.
Oh man, I don't know. Did she get canceled off? I mean, she looked so comfortable saying it. Like, she looked like she was like on her living room couch, and that some little Indian girl showed up, and she could just be like, this is like, that reminded me of the time I was over at a friend's place, and they kept offering me food, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm not hungry. I'm not hungry." And finally, the mom was like, "Would you want some popcorn?" I was like, "No, I'm okay." She's like, "I can put some curry powder on it if you want me to." And I was like,
God. Wow.
It's like this bitch, Mrs. Adams. Mm-hmm.
Said in confidence. Let's see. Is she still on? Yeah, she's still anchor of CNN's morning show, New Day.
God.
Because she's pulling the show down.
Yeah. But, she was so confident in that. Like she researched
she really was,
it. It's like,
she was researched, and she had like one glass of white wine.
Mm-hmm.
That's like what it was. It was like one glass of white wine confidence. And she just went. She was so happy, excited to say that too.
Oh my God.
She was excited. That's wild.
And then Chris Cuomo very quickly changed the subject.
Yeah.
Very well. First of all,
artful and subtle Chris Cuomo to the rescue again.
If there's two things that he's known for, it's his artistry and his subtlety. It runs in the family.
Yeah.
Another absurdity there is that they had this girl spelled called Fifi. Like that's back when Trump tweeted that, and everybody lost their minds.
They loved Fifi. They loved it.
They were like, let's take this totally innocuous event of this girl winning the spelling bee, and let's CNN-ify it.
Yeah.
let's ruin it.
Once in a while, there was a period of time over the past like year and a half where I would go onto Twitter and I would just post Kofifi. Right? Remember Kofifi, guys? And then I would always delete it because people are just like, "Shut up, idiot!" They think I'm serious. But yeah, that's one of those great, not great, totally shitty kinds of Twitter echo things that happened. Kofifi. Who gives a fuck, really?
Right.
Like, who cares? I mean, it was hilarious that Trump posted that once, but it was just like, Jesus Christ, are we really going to just ride this thing over the cliff like this and just talk about Kofifi nonstop? Like,
yeah, absolutely. That's Twitter.
That's
hey
Twitter.
Guys, it sounds like coffee. It sounds like coffee. Now I'm going to write a bunch of jokes about that.
Yeah. I love that she tied it to Sanskrit. She was like, "Ooh, like here's the connection I'm going to make."
It was almost woke in a way. I was like, okay, she knows about Indic history. All right, nice, but no, well, dumb bitch alert.
Like the only words that she studied were from.
That's how she won the spelling bee, was the Sanskrit angle. She said she's a spelling bee Sanskritist. Like, what? No.
Yeah, it's just funny how she was trying to like prove that she knows things about other cultures, and then she just fucks it up.
It was like a perfect suburban house mom or housewife moment,
Yeah, it was definitely. She definitely was offering to put curry on the popcorn right there.
Yeah, exactly. It was a total curry on the popcorn moment. And it's like innocent in its way, but just so dumb that it's like.
If you could attach a stand-up comedy lesson to that clip, if that were a comic who did a joke like that, what lesson would you take from that?
The lesson is quit. Definitely, that's when you're like, this is not for you.
Right.
This is not for you.
Comedy's all about self-awareness, at least building it if you don't have it to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, good comedy is for sure. That's the thing, is like, if you got to be, it's a thinking man's thing, right? You have to be like kind of smart. I remember one time there was a comic, and this is like pretty early, and she went up and just did like a bunch of racist jokes about Indians. She didn't do great. And she got off and she looked at me and she was like, "We're good, right?" She's like, you weren't offended by that. And I was like, no, what I said to her? I was like, no, stupid people need to laugh too. And then I just walked away from her. And I was like, that's kind of the way I feel about comedy. I was like, dumbasses need to laugh too, I guess. I was like, that's kind of who that appeals to.
Mm-hmm.
But
I saw a question posed like, why don't we see a ton of conservative comedians? And it's like by comedy's nature, you have to be open to change and open to, receptive to the changing sensibilities around you.
Oh.
So conservative comics don't exist. I mean, they exist, but they're not as prominent because what do they want? If conservative by definition is a maintaining of the status quo.
Yeah, it's very rigid mindset for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's not conducive to like a big city coastal type of thing, even though that's kind of brings to mind ideas of like coastal elitism and stuff, which that's obviously a lot more complex than that. But
right.
But then you've got these comics that are conservative that do the middle America circuit and do well because those people are cut off from the rest of the world and they're just not they're not in tune with those sorts of things. And just, I don't know. So
yeah, no, I think I agree with that as well. I mean, I don't like write off people not from New York or like less sophisticated. And I definitely don't think they're dumb just because you're less exposed, right? But I think like being proud of being less exposed or being proud of being dumb, which has tended to be how like the Republican Party has kind of marketed themselves over the past 15, 20 years. As like that's kind of been the issue. It's like being dumb is something to be taken as a point of pride. Like, oh no, we don't need to know about anything else or anywhere else. And that's like, all right, now come on, man.
It's going to destroy our country.
It's like literally. Yeah, exactly.
No standards for education. That's
awful. And the standard is like the dumber the better. Like that's kind of what the standard is. So.
And being dumb is cool in a lot of places, in a lot of pockets.
Absolutely. I have some big pockets. Big pockets. When it comes to pockets, this country is a pair of cargo pants.
Yeah.
Talking about pockets. Dumb pockets. But yeah.
We both raced for a pants joke.
Yeah.
Ambiguity is, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty in it, and that's scary to a lot of people. And so I vote to amend tragedy plus time equals comedy and introduce some more variables and parentheses and exponents and things like that. I mean, going back to your point, it's, there's more to it than just tragedy and time. There's intent. There's what did you say? You said
intent. It's like what perspective you're speaking from. I think it was like. I think that's the biggest one, if you ask me.
Let's close it out. If you could give advice to somebody who is telling a joke about a stereotype that is about them. We already covered if it's about someone else. So if you're poking fun at a stereotype about you, what piece of advice would you give that comic?
Do an accent. Lowest common denominator. No. What? I mean, you can't just leave it. Yeah, you can't. Don't just leave it at the stereotype about you. I think you have to try and play with it a little bit more and try and flip it even more, so that the audience also becomes a little bit complicit. And yeah, don't be like malicious about yourself or about where you're coming from, because that's not very interesting comedy or funny, even very funny comedy. It's very lowest common denominator to just play into a stereotype. As opposed to, you got to make it dance a little bit, I guess is the way I would describe that. So yeah, that's my advice.
And it's good advice. We appreciate you joining to share your perspective.
Super good time.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, but let's just get the plugs out of the way so people know who you are. Social media, where can we find you? And is there anything coming up that our listeners should check out?
You hit me up on Instagram, primarily at Pranav. And where are you going to find me? Nowhere, Yeah, here. I mean, but other than that, probably some little shows around the city, but nothing huge coming up. Yeah, I must not be grinding enough, but yeah.
Yeah. You're not doing 4 virtual mics a night.
You should be wearing.
I'm gonna do some nursing homes soon in New York.
Yeah, call Cuomo. I hear he's got an in.
That's going to be his PR masterstroke, is getting me in those nursing homes and really lift the spirits.
Yeah, it's like,
of the dead. Literally raising the spirits of the dead.
we squeezed the juice out of that topic.
We did. We got into it.
It's a challenge that I enjoy giving myself and giving our guests and co-hosts. It's like how far can we take this one topic, something as specific as this one stereotype? Because no matter if it's a sweeping generalization or a more specific stereotype, and not living up to some of the imposed stereotypes that society gives, there's always a way to laugh at that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we sucked all the marrow out of this. And,
yep.
And it's dust. It's pure dust now.
It's Kofifi, whatever that is.
It's pure Kofifi.
Let's bring it back.
We're bringing it back. We're bringing it back.
You can't laugh at that.